today's episode, we are joined by Sam Robinson, who's a director and photographer based in New York and London. He shoots for a vast variety of advertising clients. Sam joins us for today from LA, and we're going to talk to him about his work, diversification, and portfolios. Sam, thanks very much for joining us. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. Very excited.
No, anytime. Thanks for taking the time. So let's start off by getting you introduced to everyone who's listening. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who know about you and your work, but for anyone who doesn't, you can probably do a better way of describing it than I can. So do you want to just basically let people know who you are, where you're from, what you're coming as tonight, what you're wearing, all that kind of jazz.
Nice. Well, obviously I'm wearing black like we all do.
Of course.
Standard. I wouldn't want to change that. Sam Robinson. A little bit about me. I guess I'm a photographer by trade. That's where I trained. Now, obviously, like the sort of tradition of expanding into film, I managed to do that, a few years ago, and it was always my inspiration. So photography led commissions with film involved, and now I do both independently and together. You said I'm predominantly based out of London. That's where I set my studio up, but I had many years based in New York, and so we set an office up there, and so I'm sort of split between the two. And works very well because although I work a lot in LA, I'm in LA this week. Mm-hmm. Most of my work is between those 3 points, and so New York works as a good office in the States. And most of my work, is sort of advertising, people-based. I think the word that describes it best is lifestyle, though it's one of those kind of slightly dirty words in the industry. I'm a lifestyle photographer, which is, I think I used to call it life, because it's sort of documenting life. Mm-hmm. And that's
what was your kind of route into photography? How did it all kind of start?
My route is relatively what I'd say is like a classic route. I sort of, my father's an illustrator. Well, I mean, we go way back. My mother's Catalan. She's from Barcelona. My father's English. She's from London. Mm-hmm. And they're two very different cultures, and they're two very different people. My father's an illustrator. My mother was a teacher. My mother's this huge, emotional, bombastic, sort of Mediterranean woman. My father's a bit more demure and a bit more quiet, and sort of spends half of his life embarrassed about his wonderful wife. But we grew up in this very mixed culture between London and Barcelona. My father's an illustrator, and a really, really talented illustrator, and would just sort of sit and draw a lot of the time. And I think a lot of the time when he'd be sort of listening to the world around him happening in a foreign language, he'd be sort of drawing little sketches. And I think I was fascinated with that, but I wasn't very good at drawing. And so he gave me a camera when I was very young, and a little 110 film camera, like an old school, like pump and shoot.
Yep. And
I carried that for many years. And I think photography became my way of watching the world. And I think much like my father, I sort of have that mixture. I'm sort of instinctively, those that know me now probably would find this hard to know, but I'm quite a shy person. And instinctively watching with a camera was my way of sort of feeling involved and being there. And then from that point, I studied it, and I went to university. I went to Nottingham Trent University in the UK, mm-hmm. studied photography there. And then I assisted for a few years and worked in some great studios in London and New York. And then I decided I just wanted to do it. So it's almost like the conventional, traditional way, like study, assist, shoot. But that's how I got here.
And when did the kind of like the evolution, you mentioned that you assisted in the States, did you choose to go to America to assist, or were you assisting on jobs over there? How did that kind of come about?
So both of those, actually. I think I grew up in a time where America was a sort of different place. And mm-hmm. Growing up watching UK TV in that era, America was very much championed as this sort of play. I think it was romanticized me. I think I was destined to go to America because I was just obsessed with it. And, I used to play American football in the UK when there was like 3 teams, and it was sort of like a few geeks would turn up and be like, I want to play this game. I was kind of obsessed with it. And so I think even when I started assisting in the UK, I always knew I wanted to be working in New York, and it just felt like my natural draw. And so I was assisting with UK photographers that would travel. And then when I took the moment, I went over to America, and I bought a car, and I just drove around America and explored it. And that was sort of the beginning of me.
Very nice. Now,
I did 36 states on that trip.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a decent road trip. Nice.
It was a decent road trip, and it was me and the camera.
Can I ask? Obviously, you've now been in the States a fair bit, and you're based in New York. You're not a Pats fan, are you? No. Okay, good. We'll be friends then. Everything's fine. I'm a Raiders fan, so
no. Well, again, this will date me, but I'm a Bears fan.
Oh, okay.
Because of the era that I'm talking about.
Right. Okay.
And that sort of
course,
that era of American football. That's when the Bears were.
It's a bit like being a kind of. I can't really relate to the American football side of things, but that kind of period of your kind of basketball, with Penny Hardaway. Absolutely. And that kind of like those names that just kind of stick in your mind from kind of I guess late 90s kind of basketball.
Is that the Jordan era?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, Jordan picked up, thankfully, the Chicago legacy for me. So when Bears sort of disappeared into oblivion, sorry for all Bears fans out there, but I think we can all agree. And then Chicago was brought back through Jordan himself.
So let's go back to your road trip around the States. Self-funded for personal work, or is it just more just hey, I'm just going to go and explore America?
Yeah, I mean, I think nostalgically, I look back on it as self-funded for personal work, but it was, I was 24 years old. I was making that transition between I'd no longer want to assist anymore. I want to shoot. How do I do this? I also felt like I wanted a break. I wanted to just visually create again. I think assisting for me, was a huge part of learning. I loved it. I loved watching people, I full-time for a bit and then I freelance for a bit. And I love watching people. I love watching people work and being like, that I would do, I'm learning from them. Or you learn as much almost what you would do or how you would do it differently.
Yeah.
And I think towards the end, I was thinking, I definitely would not do that. I definitely would not be talking to my client like that. Or I definitely wouldn't, there's certain situations I vividly remember that I think inspired me. But one of the drawbacks was I felt I was starting to see visually like some of the people I was working with. So I thought I'm going to take a nice break. I'm going to get over to the States, no plan, no agenda. And I'm going to take a camera around and take some pictures. And I didn't have a project in mind. But when I landed, I literally went to meet some friends in Houston. And I don't even know why I went to Houston. It's not my favorite city and it's not that amazingly interesting.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
I've been a couple of times. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. And it was nice. But I met a friend of a friend's family and they helped me buy a car and I stayed with them for a few days and then I got driving and a project came out of that. There's a project that I did called Main Street, which was essentially, I mean, it's as simple as it could be. It's sort of like 70% of American towns have a street called Main. Mm-hmm. And a lot of certainly as you go further west in America, a lot of those sort of relatively swiftly built cities come from Main Street and they sort of grow off it. So it was traditionally, I guess, the heart of that town or city. But since then, a lot of them have changed and they're, swelled out of that area. But I would basically drive along and pull over every time. I'd try and stay on the side roads and pull over every time there was a main street. And I would sit there and I'd get my camera out and I'd nervously approach strangers for a portrait.
For your photography journey in terms of developing your own voice and your own style of shooting, how important was that trip? And at what point did you feel like your own voice started to come through in your work? Because you talked before, obviously, about being influenced by the photographers that you're assisting. And that is something that's very common. You see that a lot where people have worked with a certain photographer for a while and when they leave, the kind of lighting techniques are similar and you see them kind of like, they take their own path, but there's always that kind of that echo of the person that they worked with. So what was your photographic journey like?
There's 2 points on that. I have to try and remember it, but I think it goes both ways with the assisting thing as well. And I have personal experience in that. I have some amazing assistants that I've worked with that I'm so proud of them now, like what they're doing now. But one of the greatest things about assistants is you learn from them as well. And I know that from the photographers I work with, that they were in some form inspired by working with me and me obviously with them. So I think that's one thing that we quite often forget, that it's very much the great thing about having teams is the learning goes both ways. But I'll get back to that because the Main Street project to answer your question, I would say it is the most important project I've ever done, because it put me instantly outside of my comfort zone for a long period of time, for many reasons. I mean, I was alone. It was, it was pre, phones that connected to everything, that do everything. So, there was Facebook, obviously. It wasn't that long ago. There was ways that I communicated with people, and I was on emails, but I wasn't connected the whole time. So I would spend a lot of time listening to podcasts on the road, challenging myself. And a lot of the time I'd sort of pull over on a main street and I'd struggle to get a portrait. Some would happen within a minute and some would take an hour. And I'd have to build confidence up to go talk to a stranger with this sort of, I was shooting on a Mamiya RZ. I'd sort of pop the trunk and you'd have like a sort of mafia style like case with all these cameras in. And I had a Polaroid book, which as it developed, as the project developed, it became easier and easier, because I'd show people and they'd be like, wow, I've never been to Albuquerque. What's that like? But I still now, if there's a difficult portrait or a difficult engagement or, or difficult client or something, I still go back to that, the pressure, the feeling that I put on myself, go and challenge myself to go and, it wasn't just about taking the picture, because weirdly, photography is quite instinctive. The composition, the sort of, that is relatively instinctive to me. And I think for most of us, most photographers, we talk about the eye, but it's like if I walk into a room, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to gravitate to the same corner, the same space. That's not the challenge. The challenge for me is always, well, the interesting bit is getting to know someone and the people behind it. And I think because that was unscripted, documentary to its form of just basically trying to create a moment of connection with a complete stranger in a very short window of time. So yeah, I go back there a lot emotionally.
And what would draw you, like, what is it you kind of define as when, a great photo? Like, how do you kind of know that you got it? I guess, as you said, you slightly hinted at it, it's very instinctual. You sometimes just kind of have a feeling for it, don't you?
Yeah, I think the elements of it, I think the elements of it, the different elements, so the instinct, like composition is instinctual, I think, for me. I'm pretty sure for all of us. I feel like but what I love about, and like my biggest motivation in photography is people. That's my obsession. And, I love, as humans, we crave communication and, we crave contact. And contact, we've learned that more than ever the last few years. So I think when there's elements of the image that are instinctive and are sort of like my comfort zone, and it's that connection, that those moments that happen that I'm searching for. So what makes a great image, I think, is something that, it's a bit of a cliche, but that captured moment, that moment in time. But that moment in time it's like an accident. It's like that lovely moment where something happens that you aren't planning, in all the stuff that feels planned or instinctive.
Nice. So let's talk about, I'd love to kind of, we got so many things to talk about. This is the trouble. Yeah. And it's a bit of a jump, but let's talk about your progression from the personal project in America all the way through to now what you're shooting now, which is, to give you a bit of background, I actually came across your work and you as a person during COVID, when I was doom scrolling on Instagram, and this guy called Sam was shooting on day 25 or 30 or 40 of a big shoot, and I was just like, oh damn, okay, cool. So that it gave me like a real glimmer of hope, because I was like, yes, people are still shooting, they're kind of working around it and doing really interesting things. So how, obviously, you've progressed. I'm not going to ask you how you've gone from a man getting an RZ out of a boot to now running these, it's not, that is a subject that simply would take years to explain, I'm sure. But what was the main elements, I guess, of that progression? Was it hocking your portfolio around to very specific clients, or was it a case of just trying to shoot more personal work and then just shouting about it? or what was the kind of the progression for you?
Well, all of that and lots of that, yeah, and that's obviously, that was quite a time ago, and things have changed a lot since how I marketed myself then. But to close the loop a little bit from that Main Street project, I actually finished the project, went back to the UK to get my passport reignited, and then did a little promo, and I sent that promo out, and it had quite a lot of my Main Street portraits in there. And I got a commission off the back of that from an agency called Albion at the time. Fantastic creative, who just called me and just said, I love this Main Street project you've sent me. I got a project for a company called Skype, who are going to revolutionize telecoms, and they were sort of a big company then. And he said, I just want you to go around America and do it all again. We don't know who's using it. Can you just reach out to people? And if one person's calling them, go chat to the other people. And so off the back of that one
dream project.
Yeah,
it's
isn't
like,
it?
I got the dream. I got to go and do it again, and someone paid. So it was, we all talk about personal work. I struggle a little bit with the context of that, because I actually think that all of my work is personal. It should be. There's a personal involvement in it all. But the 100% self-initiated projects, obviously, are the ones that people are most interested in, because it theoretically shows the most of you and the most of your vision and your ideas and concepts and all of those bits. But that was as clear a day as example of go do something and someone sees it, you get to go and do it again, and they pay you. It was pretty magical, and it definitely launched. Even if it just launched my feeling that I can do this, it validated the whole principle of I can be a photographer and I can do what I want to do in this. Leap forward from there, I think as a creative, I love collaborating. All of my work is about collaboration. I don't own any project. I'm the first person to say that the people I work with will make it the project it is. And with that, a lot of that self-promotion, things have changed now, but I used to do a lot of posted material and sort of self-published work and send that out. And I love doing face-to-face. I did a face-to-face the other day with a creative director, and we were both just like, gosh, this is amazing. Just actually sitting down and talking to someone. But yeah, lots of treading the boards, and yeah.
I have a question for you. I'm finding it, I don't know if Greg, you're the same, I'm finding it very hard now for go-sees face-to-face, because the amount of time people are in the office now is way less. And when they're in the office, they might be in 2 days a week. And those 2 days are back-to-back meetings with all the team who are also in those 2 days. So trying to get in and see these people and do these meetings. I'm the same as you. I absolutely love them. I've got some little tricks that I go in and do, and I like doing kind of the big presentations.
Tap dancing.
Absolutely. No, you should see. I
give them all away.
I am so delicate on these feet. Well, here's the thing. I am actually quite delicate on my feet. I bet you don't know that I'm actually an excellent ice skater. There you go. So,
wow.
Yeah, not to blow my own horn.
Call him Tommy Tippy Toes. Yeah. Or Tommy Tappy Toes.
That's what they call me. But it's I love doing the presentations. So I gave one at a farmer agency to about 25 people a couple of weeks ago. Loved it. But trying to get them now feels like such a slog.
Yeah.
That when they do happen, I feel like they're really special, even though they're a meeting, right? So it's obviously perspective. There's nothing guaranteed.
Yeah.
Have you found that it's just harder to get them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one really has appetite for them. I think, like you say, it has been replaced with that, though. Can you come in and present to 20 people?
Yeah.
And I think that is a transition, which is interesting, because I think, I don't know, but I'm assuming they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get people back into the office. So like, how can we do that? Let's get Tom in to come and do a talk. And then, we know people have to come to that. But when I was walking, pavements with my folio, you'd go in and people would be like, wow, yeah, come, oh, look, let me get some people in to do this. There was a level of excitement that's definitely not there now.
Yeah.
And then what you're experiencing now in London, amplify that 100 times for New York, because I mean, New York went like that. Everyone left. And, even my agents in New York, they downsized their office, and when everyone went remote, now they, it.
As in physically moved out of the city.
Physically, 100%.
Right.
Physically. I mean, there's less people coming in and out of the offices in New York than ever before. and more people are remote, and remote there is remote. You know, someone could be in a different state, different time zone. It's not like not popping in now. They're
So I've actually now started just trying to meet people, not at home, because obviously that's a bit mad if you like bang on their front door completely uninvited. But you know, I am now trying to I'm actually out of London, so I'm about 40 minutes outside of town, and so for me, I'm quite easily in the belt where a lot of these guys live, and I'm like, well, look, if you're near such and such, let's just go and grab a coffee. And I'll just pop
over motorway services.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Epsom services, love it.
But the interesting thing about that, and maybe that's an evolution of this, is relationships become more personal, because there maybe you're probably contacting them through Instagram or social media or something, or through an existing connection you have, and therefore, you know, I have noticed that there's certainly been a few creators that like, I haven't seen you in ages. Should we go for a drink? And so, but it's a different example to when you used to go with a portfolio to meet one, you know, art buyer potentially or creative, and they would pull in 5 or 6 people, and you would meet 5 or 6 new people.
Well, and also there'd be that, you know, you said it earlier, there'd be that excitement of who are we going to meet? You know, and so these guys would be like really excited to see, you know, the book and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's, you're right. That kind of, it feels like that kind of level of buzz and excitement has just dropped a bit.
But I do think to talk about the evolution of that, I think a very significant part of this, and probably a significant part of the way that I have always worked, is that a lot of that now happens on set. And I think we, you know, when I talked about assisting, I definitely obviously won't name names in this, but there were some people I would work with, or I'd watch them and be like, you really don't care about anyone here other than yourself. And that is a very strange place to see an environment where the photographer really feels like they're the only important person there. And not undermining their work was fantastic, but the environment that they were in was very difficult to be in. And I think I was very clear from the start that was not my world. My photography revolves around people being as relaxed as possible, so that all sides of the camera, because tension is felt everywhere on set. And if it's a tense environment, you know, I had assistants who would work with me, be like, "Wow, you haven't swung a punch at me." You know, like, this is mad.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for many years who almost quit because the last photographer we worked with tried to punch him. It's like, it bamboozles me that people think that's a possibility.
I do think as an industry, if you have ever gone to swing at someone on set, you should really bow your head with shame and leave the industry as of right now. That would be we don't need you. Because I'm the same as you. I will try and have as relaxed a set as possible, because stress is no good for anyone. I didn't get into photography to have a really high level of stress.
No,
you know, I mean, the odd Chinese burn is fine, but don't go punching someone.
Oh yeah, or like the finger trap, so they can't actually do anything. You know, that's fine. But no, I've heard. So I never assisted, but I've heard some absolute horror stories from people, and it makes me question. Like, my big thing is, you know, if you've got a lovely crew and, you know, you like everyone likes you, if it goes south, which, you know, shoots can quite often do. So say, for example, a light breaks, everyone suddenly gets stressed. If you are only out for yourself and you spin around to your crew and be like, help, they're going to be like, get to, you know, they're going to just tell you where to go. Totally. But they're not going to bend over backwards to help. Whereas if you're nice and pay invoices, like we've talked about this before, I pay invoices on the day I get them. You know, so I always make sure that people are looked after and everything like that. And it's just it's a good vibe.
Yeah,
it sounds like you're the same.
You know, I'd hope so. I mean, maybe someone else should testify for me on that behalf, but I hope so. Yeah, no, I think it normally shows it's worth when you book someone or you option someone for a job and they're like, yeah, 100%. I had something else. I'm going to move. I definitely want to be on your project.
Yeah. I think if you have a fun set, you know, and everyone, as you said, is relaxed, people do want to work with you again. But it's also like, it's the fact that life's too short for 100%. You know, we're all doing this work, and you get shoots which are really aligned with your portfolio and other shoots which are less aligned with your portfolio sometimes. But it's the end of the day, it's just a job. And you might as well make it fun and include everyone, as you said.
Yep,
But I think a
100%.
big part of that, back to the point we were talking about networking and meeting people, I think it's so integral. Like I think my entire business was built on going on a job, and you have your clients, you have your agency, you have other creatives, you have your team, you other departments. And I think for me, it was always, I look at every single person as a client, as a future client. This makeup artist is going to go on and be like, I met this great photographer the other day. Hopefully, I met this photographer the other day. You should work with them. The client is inevitably going to move at some point. The agency creatives are going to move, and there's probably 3 or 4 different tiers of creative that are all going to be working on multiple projects. And I often talk about this with my team, and like when they're looking to expand, it's like you've got to see that room as that's 30, 40 potential clients that you're working with. So why would you ever be in any way obnoxious or rude or to any single one of those? You've got to treat every single one equally and with the same respect that they earned, that we've all earned to be there. And
of course, but you've also got to remember it's a very, very small world, and bad news travels really fast.
Yes.
If we're hearing like these stories of like a photographer like swinging for an assistant, guaranteed most people will know about that within the month.
Yeah,
but interestingly, I think only now, maybe in the last 5 years, is that a negative. Yeah. Because I know people that have worked with those people for years, and they're like, it's almost like a badge of honor. Oh, you worked with so-and-so. Yeah, I did 3 years there. Yeah.
Yeah, like, almost like, it's like gangsters when they're like, I've done Bird, I've done Time.
Yeah.
You're like, Jesus. Like, it can't be, like...
Do you think that came from the rock and roll thing? Slightly, because it's a bit like chefs. Chefs are kind of famed as having bad attitudes, and less so now. But there was a period where it was kind of cool to be a foul-mouthed, angry chef, and it was just
thanks to Jamie. Now everyone wants to be lovely and super kind, and he revolutionised that. So who's doing it for photography? Yeah. No, but I do, and I also think that the ego thing is huge, and that era of the big ego photographer, it does seem a little bit gone. Like, who are the new big names? And there's tons of successful and creative and wonderfully inspiring, but this feels less of this person has to do this because they are the big brand, the ego. And
yeah, it is interesting because I guess 10, 15 years ago I could give you the top 5 and big names, and they'd still be big names now, right? But yeah, I don't know who's coming up and through. But let's just jump a question. So let's go to changes in the industry while we're talking about changes in the industry. Obviously, we've talked about the past 5 years where it's no longer a positive thing for photographers to punch assistants, which actually when you say it out loud like that just sounds like the most mental sentence ever. So but obviously, hopefully, photographers treating people a bit better and dialing back on the angry rhetoric, and it being more of a positive thing to have an enjoyable, relaxed set. That's obviously a huge change, and one that I think is obviously for the better. In your eyes, what are the other main changes been? Because obviously the big kind of catalyst has been COVID. Obviously, you had I think a different experience to a lot of us during COVID, but the pandemic has affected our industry pretty much beyond all recognition as far as I'm concerned. And it feels like things have not quite, they're never going to go back to where they were.
But it's sort of gone on to other things, isn't it? There's kind of a bit of Brexit in that. There's a bit of conflict around the world. There's a bit of, there's other factors that are coming into all of this since COVID. AI is another one. The writer's strike. All of these things have had quite little knock-on effects, and that's quite a cumulative effect, which I feel like we're feeling in 2024.
Do you not think that possibly? I mean, I feel like I would keep going further back, and I would say probably the biggest impact. I started in the sort of digital transition, and I was assisting photographers that would never shoot digital, not going to happen, never going to happen. The Canon 5D, suddenly most photographers can make a film and they think they're filmmakers, and I'm not undermining that. I mean, it was part of the catalyst that meant that I started to actively do it. That was a huge transition. And now, I very rarely do any project that doesn't have an element of stills and film involved. And I think one of the biggest change of all was smartphones. You know, suddenly everyone has a camera.
The infinite consumption of data
and images,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, when I used to meet people and sort of say I'm a photographer, they'd be like, "That's amazing! Wow, that sounds really fascinating." Whereas now, you know, oh, my brother's a photographer. You know, I'm a photographer 2 days a week. It's sort of,
so you get that as well. So yeah, so
yeah.
I used to get we used to sit down at dinner parties. Apologies if anyone's listening who was at those dinner parties, but we'd sit down historically, and they'd be like, "Wow, so you're a photographer? Cool. Anything I might have seen, etc., etc."
Yeah.
And now I sit down and they go, "Oh, so what is it you do?" I say, "Oh, I'm a photographer." They go, "Oh, right."
Yeah.
And that's the extent of it now. And I'm like, Jesus, all right, okay.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it's amazing as well, and you know, it's inspiring to be surrounded by imagery a lot. And I think that's interesting, but I think those chapters are huge as well. And I think COVID is massive to every industry, and I think AI, you know, we shouldn't undermine what we're about to enter into.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the post-COVID feeling, I feel like it's more aligned with like post-recession changes, you know, and you know, 2008 was a big transition in photographic style. You know, we were in a period of very sort of stoic, cool, calm portraiture, and you know, advertising was very much led by this very heroic.
Mm-hmm.
And then after, you know, post that, it felt a lot more optimistic, and it felt like people wanted like authenticity and health and vibrance and energy and like humanity, and so styles are affected by that as well. And I think post-COVID, I think the uncertainty has been huge. I think people, you know, job uncertainty, financial uncertainty, like you talk about all these other elements. Brexit was obviously, you know, I'm quite happy to be political about it, a complete effing disaster for
what? No, what do you mean?
I mean,
it's been a shit show from start to finish.
Yeah. I have European clients that picked up the phone and went, we want you to shoot this next campaign for us, but we categorically cannot. We have to make a political statement here and not do that. So I'm sorry. And I'm only just winning back a few of them. But that has forever changed the European market for international photographers, because...
Do you know what? I've just found it. I found a great quote once that stuck with me about Brexit. And it's the undefined being negotiated by the unprepared in order to get the unspecified for the uninformed.
Yeah.
And actually, it nails it, doesn't it? Because then no one had a clue.
Tragically, yes.
So anyway, sorry. Let's go back to what an unbelievable shit show it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I think personally that had a bigger impact on the creative industry in the UK than COVID. Weirdly, I think the big creative exodus to other areas, and
everyone moving to Amsterdam.
And,
and Paris, apparently.
Paris,
I found out
now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So and it's just been, you know, it's not been great. All those sunlit uplands, they've just turns out not that bright.
Of which, Sam, how did you? I mean, obviously you're somebody though who has not only weathered these storms. You know, you've really kind of prospered in them and done very well. Like, how
was Brexit your idea?
Yeah, eliminate competitors.
How have you kind of got to, you know, over the years, how have you tried to diversify your business or get to a point where you felt like your business was relatively secure because you've got various kind of, pots and different fires and what have you? Like, because that's really important to be able to have some stability, is to diversify in some ways.
Yeah, I would love to sit here and say, it's all planned and initiated, but they're just amazing connections of fluke and timing. It really is.
That's not what our listeners want to hear. They want a formula, Sam.
Yeah, okay. Here's the formula then. Here's the formula, in my view, for what worked for me is I talked about people are my motivation in my image making, but in my life as well. And it was always about that. And I remember when I bought my first studio in London. It's called the Shop Studios. It was an old shop in Islington off Essex Road, a derelict space, and I sort of built in a little apartment to live in and a little work area and a small cove, and I shared it with a photographer called James Lindsay, very talented photographer I studied with, who's we've been through the ranks together, lovely guy, one of my closest friends, in and out of the industry. And what happened there was I'd come back from a job and I'd put my cameras down and I'd have all this like energy and excitement. I'd be like, I just want to talk to people again. You know, you go from these high, intense moments on set with all these people and it's all very exciting. And, you know, and early in your career, everything's exciting. I mean, it still is now. I still get incredibly excited. But I'd want to be around people. And so by luck or bad luck from my neighbor, the unit next door, the guy was having difficulty in, he was like, I'm going to sell. And I bought next door for cheap for no real reason or understanding. And I just decided I was just going to gut it out and put desks in there and rent it to more people and just have people around. And from that, again, I didn't invent WeWork, but, you know, obviously inspired them. And from that came this environment where we could be around more people. And we had producers in there and designers and a musician and editor. And we'd all work together and some would work with different people, but it just created this world. And I think that was what inspired it. And as it turns out, you know, when the opportunity came for me to buy a different space and, you know, buy a bigger studio that could also accommodate my wife, who's a was at the time a food stylist and a creative, worked, you know, in a far better creative than me, far more successful, won many more awards and incredible job. And she, you know, we decided to go into business and build a bigger studio that accommodated kitchen studios and workspaces. And so whilst it was building a sort of business, it really was just accommodating the desire to be around people and have a fun place to go to work. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and that it and again, talking about those transitions, you know, it was kind of lucky that in 2008 and 9, when I was launching my sort of style, there was a shift in advertising when people wanted authenticity and wanted to feel human and wanted to feel connections with images rather than feel like they were looking up always at advertising. They wanted to feel a bit more attainable. Mm-hmm. So it's really, the formula was luck, I think, and timing.
As often is the case, but it takes a little bit more. It takes that kind of secret sauce, and that comes from kind of, you know, the person having the ideas and the charisma and the wherewithal to kind of carry them out. So I don't think you should do yourself down there.
There was a desire and connect, like, you know, when we bought Paper Mill Studios in London, which is, you know, the home now, and it's like, you know, I love it, and it very much feels it's the space that is mine and my wife's and where we kind of run our companies from. Mm-hmm. We would never have done that if I didn't have the other photographers and, you know, the Post House laundry room, which is, you know, another great friend of mine. We set it up together. If I didn't have the support of those people going, yeah, we're on this, let's go, I'm in. Then there's no way we would have done it. We did it with everyone, and like every project I do, it's a team effort, and I don't feel like I'm leading it. I feel like I'm just there. We're just there together doing it. And yeah.
How do you manage your time when it comes to running all of these bits and pieces, as well as obviously shooting all the time?
Well, Amy manages my time. I don't manage my time. I have a key team member who has now gone off. She used to work for me and has now gone off and set up her own companies. And one of those companies is a very successful casting agency. She also runs a production company, which we work together on and share. But she also still manages my time between the areas. But I mean, the reality of that is actually I don't have a great deal of involvement with anything other than, primarily, I have 2 kids. So that's my main involvement and that's my main commitment and time. And that's where I sort of define myself. And anything outside of that, film, photography, those projects are what I'm thinking of. All the rest are managed by the great people that own them or part own them with me or whatever the connection is, you know. And
right.
So I'm very hands off in all of those other, and I've had some incredibly unsuccessful businesses, you know. Had a brewery, which I set up with a friend that burnt to the ground. And, you know, I have some fantastic stories.
Literally burnt to the ground.
How does it? Sorry, a fire at Sea Parks. How does a brewery burn to the vats of liquid? Am I missing? Sorry, am I
that flammable beer?
There's a whole separate podcast on that. I'm sure it's just an example of a very failed business enterprise. But you know, the success for me was never about financial or anything. It was just about being able to facilitate great people to work with and things I had a shared passion for.
Would you say you're pretty good at taking risks? Because I think there's probably a lot of people listening here going, I'd love to do that, but the idea of like starting a new business or buying a property to get people in, and then what if they don't turn up? And there's a lot of risk involved in everything you've just described.
But it's a really good question. I think it's a really good time in my life to ask me that, because my wife and I talked recently about Paper Mill and Next Ventures, and we were very close around COVID, 2019. We very close came to buying this property in New York, which would have been a very big development change. And it's a different beast here in America. It's, logistically, financially, all of that is different scale. And I think the reason we didn't in the end was just time of life. And there's times that I would take bigger risks and there's times that I wouldn't. And right now I definitely feel my sense to gamble, my sense to take those risks is less. And I think that...
Do you think that maybe having kids has kind of been the major catalyst there? Because I'm finding I don't know if Greg, you're the same, but I'm finding the exact same thing, that actually I'm kind of like not necessarily wanting to take so many risks, but also kind of just not dialing back on the amount of effort I devote to work. But like I clock out now out of the office at 5, and I'm just like, I've got to go and be a dad. Like that above all else. So I don't know if that's been a major catalyst. Probably
huge, huge, and also addressing that, acknowledging that, because I think there was certainly in the early stages of kids. I mean, mine are 5 and 8 at the moment, but when they were younger, and we still used to live at Paper Mill when Billy was born, my balance was not right. It was right for the time, but it's not where I am now. And I think acknowledging that I want to put the effort in other things is a transition. But to talk about the risk, at the time, it never felt like a risk.
Right.
The risk just felt, I could see the reward. I thought I could see the reward. I obviously couldn't see into the future. And honestly, if any of these big seismic changes had happened at different times, it could be a very different story. When COVID hit, my studio went from having 40 people in there working and edit, post house and editing, 2 production companies, a fashion branding PR, I can't remember, an array of great creators. It went from all these people that were friends to suddenly that whole world is gone. It's disappeared. Not just the revenue stream, just that world has gone. Like there was no, so there's been tough times. I can't remember the question now, but yeah.
I think the question was just about the risks. I think obviously you've talked about it coming at different times and it doesn't feel like a risk. I think for me though, I looked at buying a building a few years ago and I got cold feet and I basically just I didn't shit the bed, but I was just like, do you know what? I can't. I couldn't make that jump. I just didn't have, again, I live out of town. So for me, buying it was more just I'll buy the building and then try and find some people. Yeah. Whereas obviously in London, you can advertise and get people in, pretty quickly, I'd assume.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, again, it comes down to people. I had a friend of mine who's in property who helped me find it, and he's a hugely inspiring guy. And he just looked at it and just sort of went, all right, it's this amount per square foot. Yeah, you got to buy it. It works for you. And I felt almost bullied into it. In fact, so much so that he called the guy that owns it and he was like, yeah, mate, who ended up being my neighbor for many years. And he was like, I've got someone that wants this building. Oh, you've sold it? Okay. Well, he's a mate of mine. Do you reckon you could do him a deal? And he was like, sure, if he's got to buy it by the end of the week. And so we basically had less time to make that decision. But I think that thing
less time? You've got no time to make that decision.
It was buy. It was exchange as well. It was like,
full on.
And I was like, can that even happen? And he was like, yeah, you just get your solicitors, sit in the room with their solicitors and boom, it's done. And, my point
that
here,
will shock a lot of people that have recently bought houses and solicitors have not even responded to an email for 3 months.
You can do it on a day. You can do a day exchange. It's mad. Anyway. My point though was that it was the people around me that were like, yeah, do it. It's a no-brainer. You've got everything around you to do it. You've got these people who are going to move straight in. I'm oversimplifying what went into it, because it was a huge building project and it was a derelict building. It was a lot of fun. And I always, when I talk about it, especially with Sarah, my wife, I'm always, when we talk socially about it, I'm like, God, it was so much fun. And she was like, it was not fun. You were not fun.
It was not.
We're not doing that. We're not.
I was going to say, does she quite often talk about those rose-tinted glasses you wear?
Yeah. Many layers of them. Yeah.
They're the gaffer glass rose-tinted glasses.
With all of these things that you've done, though, like, you must have felt, going back to that kind of that Main Street project, or you, when you shot that Main Street project, and where you are now in your career, however many years later, what kind of things do you feel like you didn't have then that you have now, that you've developed, that have helped your kind of business kind of move forward and your photography move forward? Like, obviously your mentality is going to have changed slightly, but it was obviously still definitely there before. But all of these things develop, our characters develop, our personalities develop, our approaches develop. What are there any that come to mind, or if you feel like this is something I've realized is important, apart from the stuff we've obviously mentioned with networks and people?
Well, I think I was interestingly probably more confident at the beginning of my career that I knew what I was doing than I am now, which is a very interesting take on it. But I think, having had 15 years of learning, I realized there's probably not one job over the last 15 years that I wouldn't do differently if I did it again. And I think having been through so many years of that now, I realize that every job I'm doing, I'm learning something, and I'm learning how I'm going to approach my next one. And so I think one of the biggest learnings I had when I sort of transitioned into bigger projects was really, again, the people thing, really trusting those people around you and collaborating. And, it's all too easy to find yourself on set and hearing or seeing a loud voice that thinks they know everything or thinks they know best, and just feeling a bit like, what a waste of great people. We have great stylists, we have great makeup, we have, great creatives here. And there's one person trying to dominate it. I've never felt like my work is about my voice. It's about listening to all the people that are there on that project and being integrated together and having an environment where we all work together. And then, the little bit that I do is it's just part of the process. It's by no means the process. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So we talked earlier about stomping the pavements and hocking the portfolio around and stuff like that. We've done a couple of talks recently about portfolios. In your mind, what makes a great portfolio? What is how do you do your portfolio? Do you just have it as a selection of images, or I'd assume you think obviously a lot more about it, and that you talk about the emotional flow through it and how images work together as a set. And is there kind of anything that you've learned through the years that you've been doing this that have basically helped you create, an amazing book? And also, I assume you have a print book and iPads.
I have print book. We have iPads. Probably the most common thing we do now is a presentation, a Google slide or something, because it can incorporate the film side, and it's 100% personalized to who I'm going to see.
Yep.
I think the print book is without a doubt the least used of all of those. I think what makes a good portfolio, it's very interesting. I think for me, the simplest thing is every image in there should feel like it's mine. And I want a springboard of a story, because I think even if you're not presenting it, you want someone to be able to look at it and want to know more about those images and the understanding of it. I think flow is obviously important, because you're 90% of the time sharing it with creative people that want to understand why you're taking them on this journey. But it seems madness now to have a printed one-piece narrative in a world where we're so curated. You have to create it for your audience. You have to create it for that one. If I had 5 meetings in a day, which I don't anymore do that, but if I was to, I would have 5 different portfolios. There's no way I'd walk in with one portfolio. Whereas historically I'd walk in with one portfolio and tell the same thing, but it's in the, we don't need that anymore. The facilities are there to be more bespoke. So
yep. No, I do the same thing. So everyone gets like a personalized thing, and then I have loads of iPads that I give out and everything like that. It does look kind of slick also when you go to give out loads of iPads and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but I understand for a lot of people it's a cost thing. So so that's interesting. So when you say the print book's the least looked at thing, obviously you're I assume you have to have books in London and New York. And then your agent has...
New York, they don't carry books anymore. No, it's all done online. And it's like I say, it's so reactive now. If I'm doing a go-see, I'll take prints and I'll take gifts. And like you, I'll prepare some kind of dance or something. But
I don't tell everyone about the dancing.
No, I mean, I would say 90% of our work now is reacting to either a call with the creative or a brief or something where we will create a online bespoke reaction to either the brief, or a chat or something, or even sometimes it's a reaction to understanding that a creative we work with has now moved to a new brand. Let's send them some of my work that I think fits that, and I can write a little narrative on there. Tragically for me and for us, like we talked about missing that one-to-one, tragically, most first point contact now is an online document that someone will look at, and then you hope you get a chance to speak to them, which is really interesting because my first agent in the UK, I remember we used to have, if there was ever a moment where we were like, I think there's a few people up for this project, she'd say to me, just go in and chat to them. She'd say, go in and chat to them. Just go in and explain to them what's happening here and how you're working and how you'd approach it. And that will hopefully make the difference. And that side of it has slightly transitioned. But now we can do it like this. We can do it on me in another country cutting out all the time.
So with the kind of, tailoring these things for meetings now, how important is it that, as you said, you used to be able to go in with a kind of standalone portfolio, so not a portrait portfolio, but a portfolio with your work in that was very kind of static. And now, how much do you think that you need to have moving image and kind of dynamic elements to a portfolio when you're showing clients?
Yeah, I mean, that is very much about me because so my style of photography is about sort of almost a cinematic approach. The way I work is almost a cinematic approach. And so for me, the transition into creating films was not a simple, but definitely a logical transition. And so for me, and the way that I do that, I tend to on non-narrative based or non-scripted, we will shoot alongside and create these sort of moments where we're almost like dancing around with a DOP. And it would be strange not to include stills and moving together because they are from the same package, they are the same entity. But if that's not a strength, then obviously one shouldn't be forced to do that.
Sure.
But for me, it makes sense. But I mean, some projects don't feel like they need that, and there's no doubt about it. I love being able to just share an image, and an image that brings 20 people to talk about it is fantastic. That's what's the most rewarding part of it. That's why we all do this, is creating images that stop and ask you to look at them and explore them. So I don't think it needs to be flashy and moving. And
but I wonder whether or not photography itself is kind of evolving to the point of trying to keep up with people's attention spans. You look at platforms, social media platforms that have started to kind of move away from the still image onto kind of moving image and reels and whatever, because they realize that they can hold engagement, and that's now something that's marketable and more important. So the still image has less sway perhaps than it did 30 years ago, where an amazing photograph could stop somebody in their tracks. And I still think that kind of work can exist and does exist, and people still produce images that are capable of doing that, but maybe that's less marketable or less relevant to the society that we live in. So it's kind of interesting to get your perspective on whether or not you feel like the type of work that people want has evolved in that way, that you need to have more moving image, you need to have more dynamic stuff that can be used online or on phones, that needs to fit in certain formats. Like we've all been on shoots where you've been asked to kind of like make sure you can get a vertical in this format, and also we need a banner in this format, like, all in the same shot. And we just need the whole. Just shoot everything. Just shoot.
Yeah. Like,
just shoot close. Everything in front of you.
Shoot everything at 8mm.
Yeah. And then they're like, we can't really see the emotion in the face. It's like, because I was shooting a fisheye.
Interestingly, someone asked me to do a one-pager the other day for a project. They wanted a one-page response, and they wanted one image and one paragraph. And I thought it was a really refreshing way to ask a creative to respond to a treatment. Because what I think you do when you do a 50-page presentation is you allow the person to go at their own speed and skip through it. And in many ways, you're covering your bases. You're hoping that they like more in there than they don't like, or that enough people in the room like different things. And you guys know this. I've never done a portfolio presentation where everyone liked the same picture. Mm-hmm. Everyone is drawn to different elements, and therefore filling your presentations with this range is good as long as it's in your style and feels like you're covering the bases. But doing a one-pager was really interesting because you have to really think about what you're writing in there. You're not copy and pasting and tweaking, which obviously does happen. You're literally, you're choosing one image that defines that project and one paragraph. And I thought that was someone that had really considered that they want a creative collaboration with an artist that wants to really get into this project, which I thought was nice. I was inspired.
It's a smart way from their point of view as well, because also they don't end up with 6 50-page documents. They end up with six, and obviously you as the photographer have sent back the image that best suits your way of interpreting the brief, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to end up with 6 very different one sheets.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really interesting way of doing it.
I'll tell you an interesting thing about it. 5 people were asked to do it, and 2 people didn't submit it, which I think shows. Like, one person submitted a big one, said, I don't feel like I can do it. I know this because, thankfully we won the job, which was nice, but also I was creative after about, and I had spoken to him about it and said, I think it's a great idea. I think it's really interesting concept. But one person just didn't submit, and I think that's just a lack of maybe, and it wasn't, the project's nice. It wasn't because they didn't want to do it, I'm assuming. I think it's just maybe not being able to actually focus it in. And the one that submitted everything, you could just tell it's, like an inability to adapt, I guess, a little bit to a creative need. I don't know. I'm assuming a lot there.
Yeah, well, I think, have you got any other further questions that you want to do, Tom? Is there anything else you'd like to?
Listen,
I feel like I almost feel like we need to do a part 2 at some point, Sam, but we'll chat to Amy about that. Because there's so much more, and I'm sure, like, when we do these episodes, we always get kind of feedback from listeners as well, who then get in touch to be like, oh, I'd love to have had their opinion on this. Or
why didn't you ask Sam about? Yeah. We get that a lot. We get that a lot.
It's interesting. Well, listen, I'm more than happy to. For me, I love, again, the awful thing about people thing, but it really is. I love talking to people, and I learn so much from it. Like, whenever I get asked to do a talk, I'm giddy about it. I'm like, this would be great. But, a presentation is very different to doing a talk as well. Being able to sit and talk to people. I don't think we do enough of that in this industry. Mm-hmm. I would love to do a roundtable. I'd love, maybe that's something you guys could do. I'd love to do a roundtable with 5 creatives. They don't need to be photographers, whatever. But the Hollywood roundtable style. And
well, I got a proposition for you.
Okay.
Why not? So this is going to be episode 65 or 66. Episode 100, we're going to try and do a live record, right? Really? Oh, that was always kind of talked about. Well, we could do it as like a bit of a roundtable evening somewhere in town.
Do it in my studio.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that'd be
boom.
Yeah,
that'd be amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'd love that. But yeah, we could get a little bit of an audience in and have a lovely evening. So yeah, if you.
I don't know if you've seen the Hollywood roundtables. No audience. I'm not saying an audience is a bad thing, but no audience takes away any inhibitions that anyone has about public speaking. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But
that's true.
It becomes an intimate roundtable. So if we film it, you do like a multi-camera roundtable, whatever. Blah, blah. But it creates almost like a comfort zone for everyone there to feel safe. Because also you're probably going to edit it. it takes away the element of someone thinking, should I have said that? Should I? You can almost allow people to breathe and exhale and be a bit freer.
Yeah.
Might be an idea. I don't know.
No, that's a smart one.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Well,
the show's evolving as we speak.
Look at that, live.
And this is just some of the magic you bring to the table, Sam. There we go. This is what you're talking about. Collaboration.
Well,
okay. So before we go, though, we always ask our audience, our guests, our two kind of final questions, which are your desert island camera and your desert island photo book. Now, I'm excited to hear what these are going to be, especially your photo book, because I sometimes with guests I can kind of predict what that might have been in their kind of life that really inspired them. But with you, I'm curious as to see, you know, what photo book you choose, and whether or not what would be interesting is whether or not that would have been a very different photo book, you know, 20 years ago, because I'm sure it would be, because it is for everyone in some ways. Like, but the Main Street you versus current you.
Main Street's a bit of an obvious connection to see what I'd take there with the Americans, but I love this question. I was very excited. Firstly, I need to check, is everyone else on this desert island? Because that would be a great collection of books and cameras. So I'm assuming that everyone's still there, right?
We've actually never discussed what happens to the people when we've stranded them on the island. I assume so. It's actually a pretty good island.
It's going to be
a bit like. Did you ever see that Channel 4 program Shipwreck?
Unfortunately, I did. Yeah,
where they discover they kind of suddenly, like halfway through the series, they discover that there's another island with people on it. You know? Maybe it's like that.
Yeah, you might need to invest in a few islands. It's probably going to be more like Lord of the Flies.
We're working on it
with a bunch of islands on there.
Talking of bizarre reality shows, did you hear that there was a reality show that was filming in Scotland where they put people on an island and then they realised about midway through that they just weren't getting a show out of it?
It was all fake. Yeah.
And it was all fake, but they left them on the island for the full course of the thing. And then basically the crews just disappeared. Well, I don't know if the crews disappeared, but they basically just abandoned the project. I find that mad. So anyway,
court cases. Anyway, back to the book.
Well, yeah, quite.
The book I think will probably surprise you. I thought about this a lot. There's definitely books that I would say have inspired me over the years, but interestingly, the Sebastião Salgado's Miners Project, I went to see that printed. I remember I was very young, and it was in a show in Paris, weirdly, and I was probably, I don't know, like 13 or 14. And my parents used to drag us around galleries and stuff like that. And at the time, you know, as a kid, you're a bit exhausted by it all. But I remember just standing in front of these images and just being absolutely blown away by the fact that this was documented. And I think I didn't even know the context of what was happening in those images. I was just so moved by it and so immersed in these pictures at such a young age that I think that would have to be the book that I take. Although the book doesn't do the prints justice, the project justice, or the you know, since then, it obviously does not reflect in any way my photography. Those black and white, huge prints, I just felt like I was totally in there. And I think that was a changing point in me in believing that was something I just wanted to do. I just wanted to, you know, make just like that, or just make.
It's that thing of, I think for a lot of people, it's that thing of their first experience of understanding the power of the still image when it's to move you emotionally. And for some people, that's also the magic of that, of seeing, you know, an image of emerge in the developer for the first time. It's like quite often some real important point for people. But another thing, like you were saying, to be able to be in a space and to be moved by an image and to almost kind of see it, it's almost got parallels with kind of like a religious awakening when you see something that is especially printed that big and it has that kind of, you know, is up there on the wall. So it's almost like you're kind of having this revelatory moment.
100%.
And so it's not surprising that that's so powerful. I guess, you know, to take it back to what we were just talking about, that's what I find interesting with the way that photography is consumed these days, is it's the kind of antithesis of that, because it's so quickly kind of like onto the next. And I wonder whether or not, you know, in the same way that there's been a kickback towards wanting, you know, young photographers are like all about film and they kind of shoot everything on film and they hand print and then they scan the prints and they create this beautiful work. I wonder whether or not there will be this kind of kickback revolution from the, you know, the generation coming into photography now that are like, no, we want to put photography back on its pedestal to some extent and actually allow it to emit the power that it can have when it's given the space
Yeah,
to have that power.
Selfishly, obviously, I think we all hope for that. It feels
Yep.
it feels like it warrants it. But as new mediums of creation are born and explored, it feels less and less likely. I think we touched a bit on like personal work, but that world of personal work, it just seems, I used to use Instagram for that as my little blog and my social, and now it has to be so curated because it just doesn't feel like a testing space anymore, or something fun and creative to play with. It feels like so refined.
I started to feel nostalgic about Tumblr the other day.
Yeah.
I was like, is Tumblr still going? Because I just loved that, there's a couple of photographers I know that still use it. And it's such a nice way of displaying the work, because there's less thought gone into it. Whereas Instagram, as you said, has become so curated, and I find myself second guessing putting stuff up because I'm like, this is just a random image that I found from the archive, but I love it, but it doesn't fit with my feed. Do I post it?
Yeah,
part of me is just like,
it's so curated. Does it even fit with the project I'm pitching on today? Like, should I have to adapt to that?
Yeah,
and it's so I find. There's an avenue. I feel like that we're craving a space for people to be able to try and say less about their personal life and situation and career and all the bullshit, for one of the phrase, that social media encourages us to find so obsessive. It'd be lovely if there was a space that was like a pinboard that we could just be. I have it. I have a pinboard at home. So that's it. But it feels like we're missing that space in this world now.
Okay, so what about your desert island camera then? What would that be?
Another one. I thought long and hard about this. I love cameras. I have so many, and I don't mean that in a braggy way. I mean that in a way that it's my craft. You must get this all the time. People ask you, "Oh my God, what's that camera? How much does that cost?" Like, this is my tool. This is my tool for a start. This is what I use. And yes, I have a lot of them on set because I use them as different things. And sometimes you need to change the pace of something or break a moment, or sometimes cracking a Polaroid helps. So what camera? I think a lot of people ask me that question. I want to get a camera. What should I get? And I always say to them, you just got to get a camera you'll use. Get one that you will take with you everywhere, because if your default, we all default to our phones. If your default, even when you're carrying a camera, is to take a picture on your phone, you've got the wrong camera problem. Like when you're going to use. And I think I use a Leica Q3 for that, and I have it around my neck all the time. It's with me everywhere. I still take pictures on my phone, of course I do, and I think for that reason, it solves a problem where I instinctively want to shoot on film. But interestingly, that wouldn't be the camera I'd take. I think I would take my RZ, my Mamiya RZ, because I was thinking about this, sitting on a desert island. I could look through that viewfinder for hours, and it's like watching a film. And then it would be my little distraction. Even if I ran out of film, I'm assuming you give me quite a lot, and there's loads of Polaroid and
sort of an unlimited kind of vibe on this island.
A lab on the next island. We get
it's buried in treasure chests. You've got to dig for it, but.
And Devon Contact comes back next day and all that. But I think the RZ would be the one that I'd feel comfort holding it and just watching through. I mean, you know what it's like, just looking through that viewfinder. I mean, any the medium format waist levels, it's like watching a movie. So that would be my camera.
Very nice.
That's a very good answer. We've not had that before, so that's I like that.
No. So that's been a lovely chat. Thank you very much for taking the time, Sam. Now listen, people want to find you and kind of find you on Instagram, website. Let them know where they can find you.
Good, cool. Sam_photography, I think, is my Instagram. I should have rehearsed this, shouldn't I? Sam_photography is my Instagram, and then Sam-Robinson is my photography.
.com.
And then Good Things Happen is our sort of umbrella company that houses all the companies that I've been a part of in some way. I don't own in any way a lot of them. They're either people that have worked with me or that I still work a lot with that have their own companies. Some I'm involved with, some I'm not, some whatever. But that kind of houses the entities that we work with.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Well, listen, thank you ever so much for taking the time to come on. It's been a brilliant chat. I've absolutely loved it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the show. If you would like to find out more, you can find us on YouTube, which is just youtube.com @exposed negative, and we are @xnegative on Instagram. And if you'd like to follow us personally, you can find myself there as @Greg Fennell, which is GregFunnell, and Tom can be found as tombarnes.com, which is TomBarnesDotcom. Thanks very much.